Hello and welcome to the next video in this tutorial series. In this video, we're going to make the stories section of the website editable in Craft. So let's take a look. So if we look at what stories look like, now this is just HTML, it's not in Craft yet, but stories have a title, they have a photo gallery, and then they have rich text content. So we have to create a few new fields in Craft CMS for the stories. So let's go to our Craft CMS admin panel and we'll go to settings, fields, and we'll create a few new fields. The first one will be a photos field. So we'll create a new field, we'll call it photos, and the field type will be assets. We're going to only choose our uploads source, and we only want images to be uploaded. And previously, we've always set a limit to 1 because there's only one image that should be uploaded, but this is actually an image slider, so we want multiple images to be able to be uploaded. So we'll leave the limit blank. And for the view mode, let's actually leave it as list because again, we have a list of images. We want that to be displayed nicely in the Craft CMS editor. And we'll just put a label here called add a photo. And that's all we need for the photos field. So we'll save that. Now let's create a general rich text field that we can use anywhere on the site. We'll use this in a few places, one of them being the stories pages. So we'll call it rich text. The field type will be redactor. And we can leave the configuration as default, except I like to check this HTML button so we get the HTML view of our rich text content if we need to debug anything. And that's all we need for that. And the last thing we're going to do is create a short description field. And if we look at this again, and we go to look at a list of stories, we see that there's this little blurb here, which is different than the full rich text content of the story. So we're going to create a field just for this little description here. So we're going to call that short description. It will be a plain text field, but we'll let it have multiple lines. So for example, 3 rows. So let's save that. And now we can create a new section for stories. So let's go to settings, sections, and create a new section called stories. This will be a channel section type because we'll have multiple stories and they'll be sorted by date. So we'll leave that as channel. We'll have the stories appear at stories / the slug for the story name because that makes sense, right? We want stories to be the list of all the stories and then / my story to be an actual story detail page. So that works as it is right there. And the template will be in a folder called stories and the entry template. So the story detail page will be _entry and the listing will be index. So we can leave that just as it is and press save. Now let's add the fields we created to the stories entry. So we'll go to stories here into the field layout and we will drag them over from here. So photos first, and then we have rich text and maybe we'll put short description at the bottom. We already have a title field by default, so we don't have to add that. Let's go ahead and save this. Now, before we edit the templates, let's just go ahead and add a few stories so they're ready for us to use. So we'll go to entries. Here we have channels, stories, and let's create our first story. I'm just going to copy and paste some text over. So we have the first one and some rich text, and then a short description. And then I'll add a few photos. So this first one is going to be I'll just upload 3 files here, select them, I'll drag this to the front, that to the middle, and there, let's publish this, save, and create the next story. and save this one. Publish, save, and we'll just add one more here. And let's save this. All right, now that we have some content, let's create the templates for our stories. So let's go to the editor, go to the templates directory, and create a new folder called stories. In here, we'll have two templates. One is called entry.twig. This is for our story itself. And then one is index.twig. This is for the list of stories. So let's go back to our design templates here and get the story list page and just copy the important pieces out of this. We don't need the header or the footer or the body tag. We just need the middle piece. So I will copy that. And again, just like the home page, I'm going to extend the index twig file, not this stories index, but the main index twig file here. And again, I'm going to use this block content. I'll put the main template inside of that and save. So now that we have an index file in this stories directory, we can actually view this in the browser. So let's just manually go to stories and we see it is loading our template in. Except this content is all hard coded. So let's erase that and put in our own. So this is one story in the list. So let's get rid of all the others. And we can see if we just do this for a moment. That we just have one story here ready to be looped over. So let's create a variable that we can store the stories in once we query for them. So set stories, and then we're going to do a section query. So we'll type craft.entries.section, and the name of our section is stories. And why is the name of our section stories? Well, let's take a look in Craft. Under sections, here are stories, and this is the handle for them. So that's what we have to use in here. And we want to get all of them. So we'll say .all. We could do one just to get the first story, but we want to get all of them in this case. All right, so let's loop over them now that we have them in here. So we'll just say for story in stories. And 4. And we'll do the title here, story.title, story.short description for that little blurb. And let's just test this for now. Perfect. All of that content's coming in here. The images are all the same, but that'll change in a moment once we fix that. So let's also do actually story.url in the discover the full story link. So this .url will just link to the URL for that entry. So for the image, let's do what we've done a few times already. We'll create a variable for the photo. Set photo equals story.photos.one. So in this case, we actually have a list of photos that can come back, but we just want to get the first one in this case because our user interface here is not an image gallery, it's just a static image. So we just want to get the first image of the photos gallery, and then we'll use it down here. And let's set the alt text for the photo to be the image's title. So we can say photo.title. So let's check this out. Perfect. The first image of each story's photo galleries is loading in here. And if we click this link, we can get to the story detail page, but we haven't created that template yet. So that's broken. Now let's create the template for the story detail page itself. So we'll go to entry.twig, and this is where we need to put in our template. So let's go to our design templates up here and go to story.html and do the same exact thing where we just get the relevant piece, this middle section. It's just the article tag in this case. And once again, we will extend the index template and put the story template in this block content. And just make sure that's formatted correctly. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. If we click into a story now, we get to this page, except this is all just the hard-coded text. So each story will be the same exact hard-coded text and broken images. That's fine. Let's edit that now. So let's start with the title. Let's get the actual title for this story in here. So we'll say entry.title and check that. Yes, perfect. So if we click into Summer Days in Argentina, that title is coming through now. And you can see our URL is using stories / the slug of this particular story, which is exactly how we set it up. So that's great. Let's go down here and take the next easiest bit, which is all the rich text, and get this put in here. So entry.rich text, because that's the redactor field that we created and put onto the story section. And finally, we have this slider component. So we have a slider component here on the story detail pages, but we also have it on the home page. So it would be nice if this was a component that we could reuse for both places. So that's what we'll do. So let's take this slider component out of here, and let's create a new folder in the templates directory called components. And in that, we'll create a file called slider.twig. And let's just paste this in, format it correctly. And we'll leave that there for now. Let's go back to the story template, and we'll include the slider component in this template. So we'll say include components / slider. And we're going to pass it a variable, which is the array of photos, so that the slider template can loop through them here. So we're going to say with photos equal, and we know we're in the story entry template, right? So we can say entry.photos.all. So we're going to pass all of the story's photos into this slider component. So if we save that and refresh, it's still broken. So let's go ahead and edit the slider template. So now that we're in here, let's delete all of the images except for one, and we'll loop over for photos, photo in photos. And we have access to this photos array because we're passing it in to the component here. So we can access that here and just loop over it. And here we're going to get each photo's URL. And we don't have to say photo.1 or photos.1 here because we're in a loop. So each photo in here is a single photo within that array. So we don't have to worry about that once we're in here. And let's change the alt text again to be the photo title and save that. Let's test this out in the browser. All right, it looks like it's working, except our navigation, our next and previous buttons are looking a little messed up. So let's see what's going on there. Okay, it's because we still have relative paths to these images here. So I'm going to select both of these and just change this to be site URL and then the static directory, because again, the site URL is the Craft base URL here /web. And then we get into the static and images directory. So web, static, images. And that's where our next and previous icons are. So if we save that and refresh, great, our arrows are back in there looking nice. So this is this particular story. So let's go back and click into a different story. We have the title, we have the image gallery, and we have rich text. So it looks like all of our stories are being rendered properly, both in the detail pages and in the list page. So one final thing that we should do here is make this title editable in Craft CMS. And also, I just noticed that our background image is not showing up for these inner pages. So if we look at our designs, we have this subtle map in the background for the inner pages, which is different than the home page. So let's get this back in here. So let's first go into the base template, index.twig. And what we're going to do is we're going to take out this hard-coded class, and we're going to add a variable in here called body classes. Now, if body classes doesn't exist, we're going to have a default of homepage. So if we haven't set this variable body classes to anything, it will just put in a class of homepage, which is what we want for the homepage. So let's make sure that works on the homepage. Nope, that does not work. And that is because we missed a quote here. Okay, perfect. So if we look at the source here, the body is getting a class of homepage on the homepage, so that's great. And then if we go to stories, we are still getting that because we haven't set a class to override it. So let's do that. So now we'll go to the stories index page here. And right up at the top, we can say set body classes, and we can just override what was there. So let's do inner page and check the site. Perfect. So if we look at the source here, this inner page is getting a class of inner page and the home page is getting a class of home page. So the last thing we wanted to do on the stories list page is make this title editable. So let's go to settings, sections, and we have a stories section for each individual story for that channel, but we don't have a page for the stories listing page itself. So let's go ahead and create that. We'll call it stories listing. And this is just going to be a single section type because it's one single template. We're not repeating it. And the URI is going to be stories. And the template is going to be stories/index, which we already have created. So let's go ahead and save this. And if we click here to edit it, we'll see it already has a title field available. So let's click show the title field so that we can edit that in Craft. So we'll do this and press save. And now if we go to entries, singles, we have stories listing. So let's go to the template for that, stories index, and let's take this out and just put entry.title and refresh the page. And there it is. It's getting the title in from that entry. And we can just change this back to what we want it to be and save. So we don't need to create a single section type in Craft to be able to have a page appear on the site. But if we want to create fields that are editable for that page, or if we want to be able to link to that page dynamically within Craft, it has to be some sort of entry type in Craft. So that's why we've done that. And there we go. We have our title back in there. So the final thing we want to do for stories is on the home page. We have this featured story, which at the moment is still completely hard-coded. So let's fix that. Let's go to Craft CMS, go to settings, fields, and let's go into the homepage field group here again and create a new field called featured story. And we're going to use a field type we haven't used yet, which is entries. So we want to specifically only allow people to select stories entries. And we only want them to be able to choose one because we only want one featured story. So we'll choose, we'll write select a story here as the label for the field. And let's save this. And we have to add it to the homepage field editor. So we'll go to settings, sections, home, edit entry type. And we'll add one more tab here called featured story. And we'll put this in the middle because it appears in the middle of the page. And then we'll drag our new field here, featured story, onto it and save. Let's go ahead and edit that under entries, singles, home. And now you see we have our three tabs here, hero, featured story, riders. That's just because we have hero, featured story, riders. So it's nice to create the tabs in the same direction that the page flows. So if we go here, we can select a featured story. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll choose this one here, KTM's Nile River Rally, and save. So if we refresh, of course, nothing changes because we have to edit our template to be able to use this new field. So let's go over to our home template, home.twig. And here we have our featured story section. So the first thing we'll do is create a variable to get the featured story. So featured story equals entry.featuredstory.1 because it is an entries field. So again, it will come back with an array of entries. Even though there's only one, it will still be an array. So we're just going to get the first one there. And then we can actually not display this whole section if there is no featured story selected. So let's do that. If featured story, show this section, otherwise skip it. And let's put the title in here. And the short description. And the URL. And finally, the images. So this is the slider component again, and we don't need this hard-coded slider in here because we have a component for it. So let's go to our stories entry page and just copy this exact same thing, include components/slider, and we pass the stories in. So let's go ahead and paste that into our homepage template. And the photos we want to pass in are featured story.photos.all. So that'll pass all of the featured stories images into the slider component. So let's go ahead and check this out in the browser. Cool, so we got the title, the description, the image slider works. We have a new set of images here, and we can click into it. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.